Hi everyone, Tom Slivick, welcome back, and I'm with Jim Rooney. Jim Rooney's the county assessor. How you doing, Jim?
Hello, Tom.
Well, you were just at a pretty important meeting, I guess, Caltax conference meeting. Why don't you tell the viewers about Caltax?
Well, Caltax, they're essentially a taxpayer group that is kind of for the protection of taxpayers and to make sure that governments have are being efficient in their duties. So they're kind of a watchdog group, essentially, and they're a nonprofit organization. I think they run out of Sacramento, too. And last week they had their conference, their annual conference. They asked me as the Assessor Association president to come and be part of a three-part panel. And it was very interesting. Actually, I enjoyed the first part of it. It was they provided lunch for me, and I got to speak right next to Willie Brown and hear Willie Brown speak. And it was interesting because they were talking about, God darn it, they were talking about problems that have happened in the past. And Willie Brown actually came to the point, and he said, we made some mistakes. We didn't calculate the cost of things. And kind of an epiphany for a Willie Brown sort of guy. But it was a very interesting conference, and we brought up a lot of very important tax issues. The fire tax was included in that. So.
Okay, so you talked about a few things. You talked about the fire tax, Proposition 13, I guess a concept of changing that to have split roles,
yes,
and embedded software.
Oh boy.
So there are three issues there, and we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll discuss those issues with County Assessor Jim Rooney. So stay with us right here on TSPN.
You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN.
Hello everyone, and we're back with Jim Rooney. Jim, why don't we get on the subject right away, and we'll talk about the fire tax. Quite contentious, also possibly confusing. Where is that now? That has had a legal trigger, and it's in the courts now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's being challenged right now. The Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association has filed suit against it to get it stopped and to get it repealed. The problem is, our legal system, things aren't very quick. So last year, in this county and throughout the state, everybody received bills who were supposed to receive a bill. And then nothing was filed for a while. Finally, a lawsuit was filed, and now it's going through the system. But the second round of bills is coming out here pretty soon.
Jim, I want to ask you, did any counties or cities join in?
I think a few did. I heard that down south in San Diego they joined in.
I know they were threatening to join the lawsuit or start the lawsuit when it got to them.
Sure.
But I think Howard Jarvis has started it, so they're...
Yeah, the lawsuit's on its way. And I don't know if it's important that people join in. I guess you want to have friends along the way. But the important thing is that a lawsuit was to challenge the validity of it being a fee, not a tax. Is it a tax? Of course it's a tax, but they labeled it a fee. If it had been labeled a tax, they would have had to get the 2/3 majority to vote for it, which now in the legislature, because it's more than 2/3 Democrats, maybe they could get the 2/3, but they didn't do it when they didn't have the 2/3 majority.
Right, and interesting with the Obamacare decision from the Supreme Court, which is basically if the state wants to take money away from you, the federal state as...
Yes.
But nonetheless, a fee is a tax. A tax is a fee.
Oh, gosh.
A penalty is a tax, was the larger...
You have so many attorneys looking at every word, parsing everything out. They find justification. It's sometimes maddening.
Okay, so also the confusing part, do people still, when they get their next bill, are they supposed to protest that as well to three different...
Well, let me tell you, I heard in the past, I heard people say that if you want to get a refund when this is repealed, you need to file a protest or send a letter of protest. And I talked to the state board. I said, if this is repealed and is found not to be legal or not to be correct, do people need to file the protest? And people at the state board told me no. If it was illegal, if they weren't supposed to charge it and you sent in your money, you'll be getting your money back. So I've heard both sides. I tend to believe the state board. I can't imagine that if you paid a fee that was illegal, that they wouldn't have to refund it back to you. And
well, they might not have a mechanism in place to follow the.
Well, they didn't have a
trail.
mechanism in place to collect it, but they created that mechanism, so they'll have to create another one. The problem is they're going to spend at least tens of millions of dollars administering this fee and then possibly refunding it. So if this is overturned, it's going to be a huge cost of money just down the drain at the state.
And once again, none of the monies is going for actual fire protection.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it's not going to hire any new firefighters. It's not going to hire any or purchase any new equipment. So.
Okay, I think a lot of people have heard a lot about the fire tax, so we're going to move on to Prop 13. And Prop 13, I think, has probably been under attack since it was instituted, and it's constantly there. And now we're talking about split rolls. Why don't you explain to people what split rolls means? Well,
with split roll, there's everybody in the state, every property is taxed at 1%. You have an assessed value. Your property taxes are based on 1%. Some people think businesses don't pay their fair share because businesses' properties are reassessed when they change ownership or new construction. Business properties tend not to turn over as much as residential properties. So there are some people in Sacramento who think businesses aren't paying their fair share. So they've decided, well, let's split it so that residential properties pay 1%. And commercial properties pay a different percent, maybe 1.35% or 1.5%. And it doesn't sound like very much. Oh, just raise it 0.35 or 0.5%. But that's a 35 or a 50% increase in their property taxes.
Right. Some people may not understand it that well when you say, well, that's a 150% increase. For some reason, it doesn't sound like it's when you go from 1.5 that it is 50%. But if I owe you $1 today and tomorrow I owe you $1.50, that's half as much as I owed you.
Right? Yeah.
So
it's a 50% increase. Sounds like only 50 cents. This sounds like a 0.35% increase.
If we look at the logic of that too, Jim, if they're basing it on the fact that say, well, the properties don't change hands as much, well, is there an argument then for people that in Proposition 13, you could almost say, well, if they don't sell their house once every 10 years, maybe we ought to look into that as well. They're not moving as fast as we thought they would be changing hands. They're not getting the revenue we need.
I hadn't particularly thought of that, but maybe this is a way to open the door a little bit and say, hey, if things don't change fast enough, we'll make them change fast enough by increasing their assessed rate. But right now they can't do that because Prop 13 says all properties are at 1%. People are trying to amend Prop 13. And it can be a little bit of that domino effect that you change something a little bit, maybe you can change something a little bit more.
Where would they amend it at, Jim? Would this have to be amended in the Constitution, the California Constitution, tax code? Where?
They would try to do it in the state legislature with a 2/3 majority. But my understanding is that this Prop 13 is a part of the Constitution. They would have to change the Constitution. I'm not positive on that, but it wouldn't be an easy process. But people are trying to tax business, commercial properties, higher than residential properties right now.
Okay.
It's just another step.
It's kind of a divide and conquer, take property owners and split one, put them in this category, another in this category. There's more than the other. And
there are
so you can pay the tax, but they won't.
Yeah. There are more voters that own residential property than own commercial property. So, more voters, I guess they're not so concerned about losing votes by increasing the taxes on business. But who pays the taxes on business? Does the business or do the people who purchase the product?
I believe it's said that it gets passed on to the consumer.
Without a doubt, yeah. You want to raise the taxes on oil? You think the oil companies say, sure, we'll absorb that? No, they don't. They add it to the price of gas. We pay that.
Okay.
It's that simple.
Okay, now where do people join in to be heard on that, or I guess to be heard on how they feel about that split rule change?
Apparently, there's going to be a, what do they call it? Not a teleconference, but a webinar with our representative, George Runner, on April 2nd, and that can be found, I guess, on the website for the Board of Equalization. And, you can always write to the Board of Equalization or write to your local state senator or state assembly person.
Well, since there's always mumblings, about splitting the roles or altering Proposition 13,
Yes.
how do we know that this is a serious effort this time and it might go through?
Well, let me tell you, the split roll is a serious effort, but it's not going to happen this year. They are running out of time to get something done, and I think they've decided they're going to wait till next year, and they're going to try some things.
There may be a lot of the politicians who would be running on that.
Oh, well, next year, oh gosh, it would be a little bit harder than this year, I think. We're going to talk later about embedded software, but businesses already pay extra tax. They pay the business property tax. And there's some talk that let's do away with the business property tax and institute the split roll, which would mean less taxes for the business property portion of it, but higher on the real estate portion of it. It's just any way to get a few extra dollars. And, the state's short of money.
Okay. Now, talking about another way to maybe get more dollars would be this concept of embedded software. And we were talking a little bit about that. Jim, we only have a minute. Why don't you, maybe we have a minute and a half?
Yeah, sure.
Tell people what that's all about.
Okay, in 1972, a law was passed that said in business property, embedded software portion of any business, of any equipment, should be excluded. It was a way to promote the software industry, the computer industry. Well, this law's so old, it's still on the books. We have to appraise properties, business property, and take out embedded software. It's very hard to do because what portion of equipment is embedded software? It's an antiquated law when computers used to be as big as this room.
Okay, and not to necessarily speed things up, but we have just a few seconds. It seems like there's computers that have software in them, and then there's also things like we had talked a little bit about, like my camera that has a software chip, a chip in there that's telling the computer what to do. And somehow some businesses would say, well, we'll exclude that price from
Yes.
for the chip that's in my camera.
Yes.
That never occurred to me, but I guess it's big business that does.
Yes. Very hard to calculate and put a value on. The assessors want this old law repealed. Business don't want it repealed because it saves them money. It's
Okay.
kind of that simple.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Jim, for coming by. And we're going to take our break. And when we come back, we'll have the weather one more time. Stay with us right here on TSPN.
You're watching Amador County's #1 news and sports leader, TSPN.